every day I was hearing about coup. Maybe because some Americans had, this group of Americans that predicted that Nigeria was going to disintegrate. Yar'Adua was a northern Muslim, who was the president. And he took over from a southern Christian, Obasanjo, who ruled for 8 years. So definitely the northern Muslims wanted Yar'Adua to at least do 8 years before he could come back to the south for another, probably a Christian, to take over.
There are moments in Nigerian history when a former president opens his mouth and the ground shifts beneath your feet. What Goodluck Jonathan has put on record is one of those moments. And if you are a Nigerian who cares about this country, you owe it to yourself to sit still and pay attention to every word. In November 2025, excerpts from Jonathan's memoir, My Transition Hours, began circulating with renewed intensity across Nigerian political circles. But it was a recent extended interview in which the former president spoke with unusual candor that has sent shockwaves through the commentariat. What Jonathan revealed is not new in the sense that some of these allegations existed in fragmented form before. What is new is the unguarded directness with which he has now chosen to speak, and the context in which these revelations are landing, at a time when Nigeria's political tensions are far from resolved and questions about sovereignty and foreign interference in African elections have returned to the center of global debate. Let us take these revelations one by one, because each one deserves its own weight. Jonathan confirmed what many had suspected since 2015, that a group of influential Americans had made a prediction that Nigeria would disintegrate. He was careful with his words, acknowledging that he could not determine whether those who held such predictions were actively working to ensure that the prediction came to pass. But he raised the question deliberately, and deliberately is the word. He said there was a, quote, significant show of interest from Washington in the Nigerian electoral process in ways that went beyond normal diplomatic engagement. He noted that the United States Secretary of State, John Kerry, visited Nigeria directly on the eve of the election, something he described as unusual, since it is standard diplomatic practice for foreign governments to avoid overt appearances of electoral interference. And yet the visit happened, and yet it happened. What makes this even more striking is what Jonathan revealed about the meetings that preceded that visit. Northern governors who are Muslims were invited to Washington to discuss the Nigerian election. The southern governors, the Christian bloc, were not extended the same invitation. Let that sink in for a moment. In a country already fractured along a religious and geopolitical fault line, the world's most powerful government chose sides, and it chose its side quietly, with invitations and closed-room discussions, before any ballot was cast. Then came what is arguably the most explosive revelation. Jonathan stated that on March 23, 2015, then United States President Barack Obama released a video message directed specifically at Nigerian voters, urging them to open what he called the next chapter. Jonathan described this as condescending in the extreme. He wrote in his book, and repeated in the interview, that those who understood subliminal political communication would have known exactly what Obama was saying: vote out the incumbent, vote for the opposition. Jonathan asked aloud what many Nigerians have never stopped asking. Why? Why would the leader of the United States take the extraordinary step of appearing to campaign against a sitting African president? What was it about Muhammadu Buhari that made Barack Obama, the first black president of America, prefer a former military dictator in West Africa over a democratically elected civilian? The question is not rhetorical. It demands an answer, and the answer, if it ever comes fully, will tell us something profound about the real architecture of power in the relationship between Africa and the West. But Jonathan did not stop there. He went further back, to the Yar'Adua era, to explain the ground on which this drama played out. He described in detail the constitutional crisis that unfolded when President Umaru Yar'Adua fell gravely ill. A letter transferring executive authority to Jonathan as vice president was written. That letter was handed to a senior aide, who refused to submit it to the National Assembly. What followed was a period in which Nigeria had a president incapacitated beyond communication and no acting commander-in-chief. Jonathan was not constitutionally empowered to act in that full capacity, and no country in the world, as he rightly noted, including the United States, would tolerate that gap for a single day. It was that constitutional paralysis that led to what Nigeria now refers to as the doctrine of necessity, by which the National Assembly took the extraordinary step of empowering Jonathan to act as president without the formal presidential letter. Jonathan recalled friends urging him in those tense days to leave the State House and sleep elsewhere for his own safety. He refused. He told them that if anyone wanted to kill him, it was better they kill him in the State House so that Nigerians would know, without ambiguity, what had been done to him. That is the kind of statement that does not come from a man performing bravery. That is the statement of a man who had already made peace with what might happen to him. The North-South and Muslim-Christian divide that Jonathan has spoken about so frankly is not a secret, but it is rarely addressed this directly by a former head of state. Jonathan acknowledged that Yar'Adua, as a northern Muslim president, was expected by that constituency to serve a full 8 years before rotation could bring the presidency back to the south. His emergence, as a southern Christian, interrupted that expectation. The tension that followed was structural, deep, and deliberately stoked. On the Chibok girls, Jonathan was measured but honest. He accepted partial responsibility, not for the abduction, which he correctly noted was the act of criminals he had no control over, but for the failure of his intelligence and security infrastructure to achieve a rescue. He said his administration did its best, but acknowledged that best was not good enough. For parents still waiting, that acknowledgement arrives 11 years too late, but it is on the record now. What gives this particular interview its additional weight in 2026 is context. The USAID scandal that erupted in February 2025, when American lawmaker Scott Perry alleged that U.S. foreign aid funds had been channeled in ways that destabilized African countries, reopened the entire conversation about Obama-era interference in Nigerian democracy. Jonathan's renewed willingness to speak, and the imminent publication of a fuller biography in which he has promised even more detail, suggests that what we have heard so far is, as he himself put it, only a fraction of what there is to say. Nigeria must reckon with all of this, not as the settling of old political scores, not as ammunition for one faction against another, but as a serious national conversation about sovereignty. A country that cannot protect the integrity of its own elections from foreign manipulation is a country whose democracy is borrowed, not built. And a country that watches a sitting president get undermined by external powers without consequence is a country that has told the world it can be handled. Jonathan gave this country a democratic gift in 2015 when he chose concession over chaos. He was clear about why. He knew the Niger Delta would not fight human beings if things turned violent. They would fight oil installations, and the damage to Nigeria's economy would be irreversible. He made a calculation not for himself, but for the country. He called Buhari directly. He announced the result himself, before INEC could, to prevent excessive jubilation from triggering reprisals. He walked away. What he is doing now, by speaking, by writing, by insisting that the record be corrected, is a different kind of service to the truth. Whether it changes anything depends entirely on whether Nigerians are paying attention. The full biography is coming. Whatever is in it, one thing is already certain. The 2015 election was not simply a democratic transition. It was a geopolitical event in which Nigeria was a prize and not a participant. That conversation has only just begun.